Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about a couple special ways to rig your Wacky rigs so that they're a little bit more weedless. Some of them make them really weedless, some of them just a hair more weedless and snag free. Wacky rigs, of course, are one of my absolute favorite ways to catch fish, especially during the springtime when the fish are spawning or they're around, cover where they're kind of transitioning onto the banks or off of the banks. Like docks are a prime example. Fishing docks in the spring, it's great for all phases of the spawn, and a Wacky rig is one of the best ways to fish those docks. Most of the time I'm just fishing a Wacky rig hook like this WRM 201, and usually it's just exposed style. I'm going to be fishing a stick bait, like a Z-Man Zinkers or something similar. And most of the time, especially with the Zinkers, I don't really have to worry about, breaking the bait as much because it's made of Elastec. Most of the time, and this is a bigger hook than I normally would use for this instance because we're also using it for a certain rigging technique, but I will just hook it like this. So it's the hook point is perpendicular to the worm. Okay, so this makes it obviously a pretty susceptible to snagging on all types of things. At Toledo Bend recently, I snagged on everything. I was snagging on all the cypress knees. I was using it as a follow-up bait. I never caught a fish on it, but I would skip underneath there after I'd miss one on like the toad or something, and just get snagged on a cypress knee, and I'd end up not retying the entire rest of the day out of frustration. But that if you're fishing it this way, you're definitely susceptible to snagging on cover and breaking your rig off and having to retie. But I'm going to show you a couple different ways that you can kind of combat the constant snags that you're going to experience. The first one is going to be a way that it does a couple things for you. The number one thing it does is it reduces the amount of baits that you're going to lose throughout a day. You can reuse a bait over and over again. If it's not made of Elastec, it's going to be way more durable overall because it's just not going to be breaking off. If you're using Elastec, it's already durable enough, and so you don't have to worry about that. But this is right here, a Wacky rig tool. A lot of people like to use this. You essentially have these little O-rings. You put the worm that you're using in the tool, and then you just slide one of these O-rings onto your bait in the appropriate location, which is about right there. And somebody pointed out, it's not the center. Most of the best hooking places on a stick bait are kind of like right behind that smooth collar that you find on them, because that's kind of the point that allows it to fall horizontally like this. But putting a O-ring onto a Wacky rig like this allows you to hook a single O-ring, by the way. It allows you to hook it like this. So now you've got a hooking scenario where you're not going to be losing this bait as much if it's not Elastec. You're just essentially going to be able to reuse this for multiple fish, but you also have the hook in line with the worm. Okay, now yes, the presentation when you're bringing it forward, it's still going to be hook point forward, so you're still going to be able to snag into stuff if you're pulling it into cover, but not as much. You see how the hook point is actually kind of protected by the worm. So when it's falling, because it's in line with the worm, it's kind of parallel, it's not going to snag near as much in cover. Now, you're still going to snag. It's still an exposed hook, orientation like this, but you're not going to snag as much because your hook point is parallel with the bait. So your hooking percentage might go down a slight bit, but you're not going to snag on cover as much. This is something I like to do if I'm casting around like light cover or casting into beds and things like that. I really like putting an O-ring on like that so I can hook it parallel with the bait. So that is a very, very subtle way to reduce the amount of snags you're going to experience, but I'll warn you, it's not going to like change the world when it comes to the amount of snags that you're going to experience. You're still going to snag. But the next solution that I have is there's a lot of different Wacky rig hooks on the market that allow the baits to be a little bit more weedless. And so there's a couple different things that people offer on the market. One is a wire, like a steel wire bait guard, which I don't like those. I don't like the steel wire guards that much. And the reason for that is because I think that, honestly, and I know that bass eat all sorts of prickly creatures, but I honestly don't feel like I get a really good hooking percentage with those stainless steel wire brush guards. And I think it's because when the fish eats it, it stabs them. You know, it's such a thin diameter, it will stab them. So I like something that's a little bit less stabby, and that is why I like to use these fluorocarbon weedless hooks like this. This right here is the WRM 201FG. So it's a fluorocarbon weedless hook, and it comes in this kind of V formation, which I really, really like. If you have one that just has a single strand, it's not going to be as weedless as one that you can spread out and it kind of protects it on both sides, like that V right there. So I like the fluorocarbon ones for the reason I just mentioned. I think the fish is less likely to try to spit it out because it feels something kind of stab them. And also I like the flexibility and the invisibleness of fluorocarbon weed guards on these hooks. So that's another really good option, is you can just hook this which way, and now you've got a Wacky rig presentation that is pretty weedless any which way you look at it. Still, if you're fishing hardcover with it, if you're not very ginger with that presentation as you're pulling it through that cover, it still will snag, but it's a really good solution overall for fishing in and around cover with a Wacky rig. Another way to rig it, which is one that it really depends on what type of material you're using. If you're using a Elastec, this is one of the best ways to make your Wacky rig ultra weedless. And that is to take an oversized Wacky rig hook. This right here is the WRM 201, the 3/0 version. Okay, usually I'm using a 1/0 for most of my exposed hook Wacky rigs. But in this situation, what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually hook this bait through like we normally would for a Wacky rig, but then we're going to go ahead and dig the point back into the Elastec. So it's going to be like this. In fact, I actually did that backwards. Because I want the eye of the hook to be a little bit closer to the middle. So we're gonna do this like this. So bring it through and then hook that point into it like that. So that right there is going to make this very weedless. So the hook point is actually protected by the Elastec itself. The reason why it works so good with Elastec but not traditional plastics is because Elastec is so compressible, it's so soft, and so your hooking percentage is not going to go down very much because you're rigging it this way. But if you use traditional plastics, it's going to lump up in the gap of the hook, and you may restrict the ability for that hook point to actually come out and hook the fish. But with the Elastec, it's not as bad as traditional plastics. So this is a really good way to fish a Wacky rig very weedless. So use a oversized Wacky rig hook and hook it like that and just embed. It's almost like fishing a Texas rig, but not quite as clean as a Texas rig. But as far as a Wacky rig presentation, that's exactly what you're looking for. But anyways, guys, those are just some options for fishing a Wacky rig weedless. Let me know what your secrets and what your little tips are and tricks for making a wacky rig more weedless. I really want to hear that in the description below, and or the comment section below. And also make sure you check out the affiliate links in the description below to be able to get 10% off of your order for the things I just talked about, and it helps support Sonar Fishing. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, trust the process, and I'm going to see you out on the water. Take care.